This is the Tame Aperture podcast.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Hello, Hal, do you read me?
Do you read me, Hal? Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you. I read you. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
Come on down and jump some of this shit.
You'll always have that. Sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Welcome to the Tame Aperture podcast, where we talk all things movies from first-time directors, indie films, art house, and much, much more. Today on the podcast, we talk the 1973 crime drama, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, directed by Peter Yates, starring Robert Mitchum, Peter Boyle, and Richard Jordan. And special guest star Mo Green as Jimmy Scalise. After his last crime, has him looking at a long prison sentence for repeat offenses, a low-level Boston gangster decides to snitch on his friends to avoid jail time. I'm Gabe Vienendahl, filmmaker, film instructor, and movie enthusiast, and I'm joined, as always, by veteran podcaster and editor Alan Martindale. And we're joined by special guest and veteran podcaster, writer, and host of the Dread Media podcast, Desmond Reddick. How the hell are you guys?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, thanks for being on.
When you say, I'm veteran podcaster. Des is like super veteran podcaster. Like
you have a decade.
I've got a decade
and a half.
Yeah, he's like he's kicking everyone. I mean, I think he invented podcasting. I'm not sure.
I'll be happy to let the two of you, decade plus podcasters, know I'm 1 year deep now.
That's good, man. It's a
nice,
a tick mark.
Nice.
14 more to go.
I will say this before we get started. I met Desmond because I was a fan of his podcast. Dread Media, I think, is fantastic. Anyone who listens to this show knows, I'm a big horror fanatic, and Desmond does a show that really, breaks down every type of horror you could ever expect. I love it so much that I am actually a patron. And I definitely recommend going and checking out his show. It's fantastic. And so, Desmond, we're obviously like super stoked to have you on the show.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Alan,
much.
Wait
I
a minute.
appreciate
Wait
that.
a minute. Alan likes horror films?
I know. Weird, right?
Okay.
No one would have guessed that. I know. It's crazy. But also, Des, before we jump into the movie, you're a writer too. I know you've got one novel out, two novels out.
One novel, yeah. I've got two novels completed, but one novel's
Okay.
out.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? I'm interested to know what they're about. What's that novel that's out right now? What's that about?
Well, I just started writing what I thought was going to be my first finished, polished novel, and then I got this opportunity to pitch a novel in a shared universe called Monster Earth that's put out by Mechanoid Press. And they still have two anthologies, and they were looking for pitches for something that sort of bridges the two anthologies together. And the Monster Earth universe takes place in a world where there wasn't any nuclear armaments race. Instead, countries use giant monsters to fight each other as proxies.
Such a good premise. Such a good premise.
It's great, yeah. I loved it. So mine's called Mother of Abominations, a Monster Earth novel. And it's sort of like my look at the troubles in Ireland and IRA style terrorism. And basically it's about a young terrorist girl who is... she's going to summon the Loch Ness Monster to fight a giant griffin in London, essentially. And that's like near the end of the book, but it's on the cover, so it's not really a spoiler. But I think it's kind of fun. I like to call it. It's got like some occult stuff, and Aleister Crowley's in there, and I like to call it The Devil Writes Out meets what is that one called? The Devil, the Brad Pitt Robert Redford. Oh man,
I have no
I
idea.
forgot it. The IRA movie. Can't remember what it is. Is it Brad Pitt even? I can't remember. That's bad. But yeah, so I've got that out. I'm working on a nonfiction book right now, and I still have a second novel done. But
that sounds amazing.
No plans yet.
You had me locked in at Loch Ness. I was interested in the mystery behind that. And then Griffin, you combine those two things, and that's a killer combination.
Yeah. But I don't know if you know, but Aleister Crowley had a house that overlooked Loch Ness.
Oh,
yeah, didn't they sell that house? Or
it's been sold a couple times. Jimmy Page owned it once.
That's right. That's right.
I think that the story goes that he arrived home to see his guitar sitting in a guitar stand, and the guitar itself began playing the opening riff for Stairway to Heaven.
Nice.
I mean,
that
pretty
was
much
his story.
Every good rock and roll story, every good occult story has something to do with Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but of course, Jimmy Page was probably on acid, and it may have been a story that he uses to cover up the fact that he stole the riff from Stairway to Heaven from another band. But it's a
I don't
fun
think
story.
there's a probably in there.
Most definitely.
That movie you were talking about is Spy Game.
Oh no, I wasn't thinking of Spy Game. It has the devil in it.
And Brad Pitt.
I might have the actors completely mixed up.
I didn't even know.
That's okay.
Yeah, I didn't even know they were in a movie together.
I remember
Spy Game's actually fun. I kind of like Spy Game.
Yeah, Spy Game's a good movie. I actually quite enjoy it.
Well, speaking of movies that I've never heard of before, I'd never even heard.
I was just gonna say
of the Friends of Eddie Coyle before. I don't know how I haven't heard of this film because it's got some great actors in it. It's got a good story, and it seems like one of those 70s movies that people would remember. But for some reason, I never even heard of it. And so, Desmond, we asked you to pick a movie, and you chose this one. So maybe you can give us a little background and tell us what made you go with this one.
Well, I saw this as a kid. I saw a lot of movies as a kid with my grandfather on just like blank VHS tapes that he'd taped off of television. And since I was like 3 or 4, I was watching all these movies with him. And it's where I got my love of horror, like Universal movies and stuff. I thought I was the only kid on earth that had ever seen House of Frankenstein. I'm like, this movie, no one's ever seen it. And then, I got old enough to pick up a magazine, and I'm like, oh, okay, everyone's seen this movie. But along with that, I developed a love for noir and crime films, and like to this day, like A Touch of Evil is my all-time favorite movie, I think. And Maltese Falcon and Angels with Dirty Faces and stuff, and always loved it. And I always loved Robert Mitchum, and this movie, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, was on one of those tapes. And Mitchum always sort of reminded me of my grandfather as well. So I've probably seen it a dozen times, I guess. Why did I choose this one? I know I gave you guys like 2 options. One, I was like, I'm the horror podcast guy. So if someone invites me on to talk about any movie that I want, I'm like, oh, I want to watch something that's not horror, because I can do that anytime. But so I just wanted to watch this one again. It's been, I don't know, probably 2 years since I've seen it. And I just think it's the greatest collection of character actors that has ever existed on screen, along with one of the greatest actors that's ever, ever done it. Robert Mitchum is, he's a wild man, and, a legit ass kicker and a legit tough guy. But man, that guy draws the camera like very few people does, and this is such a quiet movie.
Yeah,
he's amazing in it. And the thing to me is similarly to Alan, I consider myself a movie buff, and I love 70s Americana in terms of film. Serpico, French Connection, of course, The Godfather. And then you look at something like, The Conversation or Taxi Driver. And I've never heard of this movie.
Really, eh?
Never heard of it.
And Gabe, one more thing, Criterion Collection.
And that's the other thing.
Like Gabe always, I choose the depraved movies. Gabe chooses the Criterion Collection movies.
Right. Right.
So Desmond, I'm as soon as that comes up and I start getting the tone of the film, I'm super stoked. I'm like, Desmond chose a champion in this film right here.
Yeah, and you know, I think maybe why it's not so popular is that it's essentially bloodless. Like it's not, you know, it's not Scarface. You know, even Godfather ends with a very, very bloody killing. And there's, you know, plenty of examples of violence and the aftermath of violence in that movie as well. But there's just there's one person gets shot, well, two people get shot, and one person gets a gun to the back of the head, just like to knock them out. And I think that's all the violence in the movie.
Yeah, it feels like there's that one bank shooting, and that's the most violent of them all in terms of if seeing any kind of blood or gore. And so I wonder how Alan even got through it.
That's a good point. Well, it did kind of build. It made it more impactful when you did see the violence, because it's really, when you see these guys, every interaction that these guys have, whether it's the gun runner or it's the bank robbers or even Robert Mitchum's interactions with Jackie Brown, the gun runner. Yeah, all of them are very. It's very tense, even though they don't play up the tenseness, if that makes any sense. Like, you can tell that these are dudes who would not hesitate to get crazy if they need to. And so there's always that lingering threat kind of in the back of your mind. And so, and it's almost like it's pretty suspenseful without really going over the top and beating you over the head with it. And then it just makes the violence like that more, I guess, realistic and more impactful. I mean, it's not like super depressing. I mean, the guy in the bank gets shot and they just kind of shrug it off, you know? Yeah. Yeah. And so it just makes you just feel, I don't know. There's a tenseness there that's not over the top.
But they also don't fetishize the violence either, right?
Right.
Like, killed the guy and they're like, what the fuck? And he's like, well, you know, he hit the button and blah, 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 or whatever. And that's kind of it. They're like, okay, it's business. Right. But they are like pissed at first, but in like a different movie, you know, he was swung the gun around at everybody else and said, anyone moves, they're going to lose their fucking head or whatever. You know, there's like there, it's actually like a coarse film. There is like a lot of cursing and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of terrorizing.
Yeah, there's absolutely not. One of the things that in the beginning of the film too that I loved, Desmond, was it's very kind of long-winded in its presentation at the start, and which makes it very 70s. And then when you enhance that with that 70s musical tone,
jazz score, man, it's so
good. The score is, I love it, and it's so on the nose where you have the bank president, and then all of a sudden, as soon as you cut to the villain, the musical tone changes entirely. But I love the on-the-nose kind of musical presentation of it. What did you guys think about the score throughout? I loved it.
It was great. Like it's weird to watch this movie for the first time in 2020, because I'm looking at it through the context of like Tarantino films and even like Ocean's 11 and stuff like that. So like I'm thinking it's going to be one thing based on what has come in recent history, and it's a totally different thing. But I loved it because they could have gone they could have gone over the top with it, and they didn't. Yeah,
and I think probably part of that not knowing exactly what you were in for. I did call it a heist movie, and I kind of winced after I sent those messages later. I'm like, it's not a heist movie. It's got heists in it, but really it's just about a couple days in the life of a lot of very shady individuals who are, I don't know, they sort of run into each other all the time through their work as ne'er-do-wells. You know, you've got the middleman who buys guns from a gun runner to sell the guns to these guys he knows who rob banks, and then you've got this shady ass bartender who is just sort of at the crux of everything and sort of overseeing the bar where the middleman and the thieves like to hang out. And it's just no one's a good person in this movie. Everyone is just kind of vile, but they're also not evil. They're just guys who know how to do one thing really well. So
I mean, no, absolutely. I hate, the thing to me too is like I hate drawing comparisons to modern film, but there is a little bit of tonality of like the town where you have,
Yeah.
I'm not just comparing it because it's the same city of Boston, but these characters that just kind of are going about things as if it's just business and it's just, this is what we do. And we're slinging guns and we're going and doing robberies and we're doing all these. And there's a little tonality there between that and that modern film by Ben Affleck, which is The Town. I don't know if you guys sensed any of that or if I'm way off base.
No, totally. I mean, the Friends of Eddie Coyle is the granddaddy of The Town and The Departed. And, there's this sort of like, I guess, subgenre of Boston-based crime films. And I think it's like the blue collar aspect of it, right?
It feels like it would be like an early Scorsese film.
Sure, yeah.
Like it. I don't know. We did actually on this podcast watch Scorsese's first film. It's awful. I don't know if you've seen it. Look who's knocking at my door. It's god awful.
No, I haven't.
Don't bother. It's a waste of time.
Gabe Alan says no, and even I say partially no. I mean,
it's terrible, but it does kind of feel like it might be a Scorsese film where he's kind of polishing that style. Like there's a lot of similarities, like Taxi Driver and obviously The Departed. It feels very much in that ilk.
Right.
And they're sharing Peter Boyle.
Right.
So,
did Peter Boyle ever have hair?
I don't think so. Because
he was born bald like all babies,
and he just grew it out in the back and on the sides.
Yeah, it just never grew on top. I guess. Yeah.
Good God,
it looks great.
He's a Taxi Driver too, so there's a little bit of a connection there. You mentioned Taxi Driver, and it's like, okay, well, they've got a similar actor,
right? Yeah,
same actor.
Well, it's a funny Peter Boyle story. I've already mentioned my grandfather. This is a weird aside. I think I've mentioned it on Dread Media before, but my grandfather liked to watch TV. He was a vet and he always had bad knees and stuff. But the last movie he saw in theater, if you asked him if he wanted to go to a movie, he'd say, the last movie I saw in the theater was Patton. The next movie I go and see in the theater will be Patton 2.
Still waiting on that one.
Yeah. And so that was something that he said several times throughout my childhood. And then, I don't know, I'm 19 or something, and I turn on TV. I never watched Everybody Loves Raymond. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Everybody Loves Raymond, where Peter Boyle plays Ray's dad.
Yep.
And I'd never watched a full episode before, but I was just flicking around on the TV, and I stopped on it, and because Peter Boyle was on screen. I'm like, Peter Boyle. And I think I didn't even know that he was in that show. Like, that's how little I'd seen of it. And this, I stopped, and this line of dialogue came up. Ray says, "Hey, Dad, you want to go see a movie?" And Peter Boyle said, "The last movie I saw in the theater was Patton. The next movie I see in the theater will be Patton 2.
No way. No way.
And I damn near blacked out. like it freaked me out. Now, maybe it's just a thing that old guys said. So
yeah, right.
Maybe that's it, but it fucked me up. So I have a lot of love for Peter Boyle as well. And of course, Young Frankenstein, like
it's kind of amazing.
So
the range he has, because you don't think of him as a range actor, but he can go from goofy, like Young Frankenstein and the bits and pieces I've seen from Everybody Loves Raymond. And then also I remember him from the X-Files, from the one episode he did on the X-Files, which was fantastic. I don't know if you've seen it. I can't remember what it's called.
I'm blinking on that too. I'm pretty big X-Files.
He won an Emmy for it. It's like
Holy shit. I gotta look that.
It's a guest role, and it's just a one episode thing where he's like a psychic who can see people's death, and he's so good in it, but he's kind of a little quirky but a little dark. And then you see him in this, and he's menacing at times, but he's also very comforting. And you don't think of Peter Boyle as a range guy, but he really does have it.
I mean, I do always think, and you mentioned this, Desmond, but I always think of Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
That's one that, and everybody, right? But if you look at his list of credits, and Alan always likes to do this to me, which is like, guess how many credits this guy has.
We compare it to Samuel L. Jackson.
So Samuel L. Jackson has 200 plus, Alan? Is that what
I think so, yeah. I'm going to look it up right now.
Right? And Peter Boyle's got quite a few, too. He's at 96 credits as an actor from 1966 to 2009.
Yeah, wild.
That's
Wild.
working all
I love
the
that.
time.
I love that tie-in that you have to your grandfather. I think that's so cool. I'm always interested in how people see a film or watch a TV show, and then how it has a personal tie into their life in some way. So that one in particular is extremely strong,
Right.
because it's
Yeah.
like Grandpa said this, and then Peter Boyle said, yeah,
That's wild.
it is wild. It's insane.
So this movie, it's a little bit more difficult to walk through, just because it feels like there's it feels like a lot of vignettes going on.
Right.
But so we kind of like to walk through it, but I think what we can do is kind of explore the different storylines going on. Obviously you have the main storyline with Robert Mitchum, and he's about to go to prison for, I think he's going to do 2 or 3 years. And for it's, I think it was a truck heist or a cargo heist or something along those lines. He was driving a truck.
He was transporting bottles of Canadian Club, so I think it was maybe stolen booze.
Okay,
or something.
that sounds right.
Desmond is our expert Canadian, so he knows.
Yeah, he knows. His role kind of reminds, because Robert Mitchum is, and Des, you said this, where the camera just loves him, and it really, he grabs your attention. But his role in this, it's similar. It's not the same, but it reminds me almost of Al Pacino in Donnie Brasco, because it's like, you think of Al Pacino and you think of a leading man, like the guy who's, he's Michael Corleone, like he's the guy, he's the guy in charge. But in Donnie Brasco, he's an underling. And so it kind of feels the same way, whereas Robert Mitchum's definitely a tough guy. And you can see him, he can throw his weight around if he needs to. He can intimidate if he needs to. But really, in the grand scheme of things, he's kind of an underling.
Yeah.
There's a scene in there at the beginning that I love so much. His acting is so good, where he's talking about, it's the cafe scene, and he's and he's given the idea about the knuckles, and he's talking about how the knuckles, and I love, and Desmond, I'm sure, can appreciate this because he's a writer, but I love when to me, it's a prime example of like really good writing, where you give the level of exposition, but you don't just say things, you give stories to convey the exposition. And he's telling this story about how he went through the heist, or went through the transfer of the booze or whatever it was. And he got caught, and the guys that caught him put his hands in the drawer and slammed his hands in the drawer. And have you ever heard the knuckles cracking and all this kind of stuff? And so you're getting the exposition, but you're getting it in a really good kind of, and Alan mentioned this before, you're getting it in a really good kind of vignette of a story that's in and of itself separate. I love it. I love that little delivery, and his delivery is amazing. Yeah.
So great. That dialogue is word for word from the novel as well.
Well, that makes more sense to me then too, because I put in my little notes here, which is that writing is, I love that writing. I think it's great.
And the way they deliver it, it's funny because it is like it is right from the novel, but I feel like the pacing of the dialogue in this movie is almost too fast at times. Like there's zero time to react. Like they pitter patter back and forth really quickly, getting through a lot of really great dialogue at a really fast pace.
I'm glad you said that. It doesn't feel rushed, but I was struggling to keep up at times.
Yeah. Yeah, like these guys, they just it's sort of like just a bunch of motor mouths in one movie, and they're not waiting for each other. Like they're, I don't know. It's like the next guy starts talking the moment the period is mentally seen on the page, right? It's just like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and especially that scene that you said there, Gabe, is just it's probably the first real moment of acting in the film that is like profoundly great.
And
that's the other thing is, go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to say, it really just sets the tone for what's going to come too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, like his performance there, there's two things, and Alan hears me say this all the time, but I always feel like you can take a good piece of dialogue and really kind of mess it up, and based on how you perform it and based on how you kind of exude the character. But I think Mitchum's so good there, it kind of just strengthens that whole piece of dialogue. But the writing's so good. I kept putting in my notes, and not to sound like a broken record, but man, I just felt like and I'm not a screenwriter. Like, I'm an editor and a producer, but I don't really write. I like writing as a hobby, but I'm not a writer. And I just kept putting in my notes, man, the writing is so good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And it is like the story is fragmented, right? There's no clear, like, you don't really get a full story from any of these guys, really. But you're getting this sort of snippet, and, you know, you're seeing a real rundown, tough guy in Eddie Coyle. You know, you're seeing a hotshot kid who, you know, thinks he can sell guns to anybody, who's also like pretty derisive of younger. Well, I mean, like, these hippies want to buy machine guns from him, and he thinks it's funny. He's like, these fucking hippies want machine guns, right? And then
I was trying to figure that out. I'm like, wait a minute, where do they come from? What?
Yeah.
from like a converted ice cream truck, apparently. I don't know.
They drove all the way from San Francisco
with some flowers in their hair to buy some M16s to rob a bank.
Yes.
And then you got these like workaday like bank robbers that we haven't even talked about, like Alex Rocco. You mentioned Mo Green, like, and Joe Santos. Like, the Rockford Files is one of the probably top 3 TV shows of all time for me. I just love that show, and he was so pivotal in that show. You've got Alex Rocco. So I don't know if you know this story, but Alex Rocco, what was he born? He was born.
Well, I jokingly said, and you know that you caught onto that. But for those that don't know, I was jokingly saying in the introduction that is Mo Green.
Yeah.
From The Godfather, who plays Jimmy Scalise.
I mean, honestly, I only know him as Mo Green.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So here it is. Here,
this is actually some backstory for us.
I thought this was like hot goss, but this is also in his IMDb bio, which I'm just reading for the first time. So he was born Alessandro Federico Petricone Jr. To Italian in 1936 to Italian immigrants in Cambridge, Mass. He grew up as a member of Boston's Winter Hill Gang.
Wow.
Oh, so he's legit, man.
Which is Whitey Bulger's gang.
Whitey Bulger, yeah.
So he did that. And so he's taken in by cops or FBI because he was suspected in a murder. Jesus. And then he was like, fuck that, I'm out of here. He moved to LA, and no one else from his hometown ever saw him again until he was Mo Green in like the biggest movie of all time.
That's a way to hide out.
And so
that is the greatest story I've heard.
And they filmed this movie. And well, speaking of Whitey Bulger, so like on the commentary that Peter Yates does, they don't actually mention Whitey Bulger by name, but they talk about a friend, and I think it's like code. You like Friends of Eddie Coyle. Eddie Coyle doesn't have any friends. He has other guys that do criminal shit that he knows. But so they had a friend that well, first of all, Mitchum talked to 3 cops when he first got to Boston. And from his conversation with the cops, that's where he developed his accent. And they brought in guys from the FBI to make the bank robbing real, because the bank robbery scenes are very real. Like, they get the guy at home, the manager at home, and they hold his wife hostage while they take him to rob the bank with them.
And those fucking masks that they wear.
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought those out.
Awesome.
Like,
yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is
they're fantastic.
Those masks are scary.
Yeah,
they're scary.
But also, Robert Mitchum was pals, buddy with Whitey Bulger while they were making this movie.
Jesus Christ!
Like he was getting advice from Whitey Bulger on what it was like in the criminal underworld of Boston. So you got that, and then of course, so they come to do the filming, and all of Alex Rocco's buddies are in the Teamsters, because of course they are. and so all these like old tough bastards from Boston are coming up and patting him on the back and like, "Hey, Bobo," right? Because his nickname was Bobo, so they're like, "Hey, our old buddy came back," kind of thing. And yeah, I'm sure he was kind of terrified for probably half the filming of this movie.
God, I cannot imagine. I mean, that's imagine being on that set too with all these tough dudes. Whitey Bulger's there. Whitey Bulger is on set. That's
totally.
It's terrifying to me.
That's why there feels like a real serious level of authenticity to the film. And I put that, like, the cars, the scenery, the music, the clothes, just the feel and the ambiance of what's created when they go and do the heist or the bank robberies. Like, it feels legitimately real. It feels not over dramatized for film, but like it's actually happening almost in not a documentary style, but just it feels like it's visceral.
Yeah, definitely. And it is like a very like handheld style and lots of long lots of long shots. And it's just a very engaging style of filmmaking. And it doesn't feel super cinematic. It feels like tight and controlled, and it feels like you're meant to be there.
Yeah, it does.
Following this car or hanging out with these guys in a bar or whatever. Like it feels very close and personal, this movie.
And the real big opening, it's hard, like Alan mentioned, to kind of go through it, but basically they've been tracking down this bank president, and they're kind of following his every footstep, and then they end up in his house, and then they take him and they basically kidnap him and take him to the bank to get the money at the vault, and then they threaten his family. And so that's the first of the heists, or the quote unquote bank robberies.
Yeah.
So Desmond, have you read the novel?
Yeah, I read the novel. I mean, I think I was like 12.
Okay. So it's been a minute.
I don't really remember much about, I mean, other than the fact that it is very similar to this movie.
Okay. Because I was going to ask how loyal it is and how closely they follow it. So
very. And I mentioned that scene at the coffee shop, the diner or whatever, but like, I don't want to say most, but a shit ton of the dialogue from this movie is ripped right from the book. I know that for a fact. Because I'd seen it probably twice or three times before I read the novel. And then I read the novel and watched the movie right after. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is all from the novel.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's I mean, we talked about the writing is just fantastic. The characters are fantastic. One of my favorite characters and one of my favorite stories kind of told as this vignette is Jackie Brown, the gun running kid. Like this kid, from the very first interaction that he has with Robert Mitchum, to the point where he is actually trying to buy the machine guns, and the intelligence he uses as he's getting, cause he feels a setup coming on, so he figures out a way that he can kind of get out of the situation and still get the guns and still make good on the deal. And then obviously the interaction with the hippies. I mean, he was my favorite part of the whole movie.
Yeah, he's great because he's like hippie age, but you know that he never had time for that because he was a little shit street kid, tough guy who blew big. But I love that scene where he's buying the M16s and he points the gun at the kid. He says, "You go up there on foot." Yeah. And he's like, "Why?" He's like, "Because I want the moonlight." No, because I don't want to walk up there with a bunch of guys with M16s. Well, they know I have money. Bring them out here.
Street intellect is like next level.
Yeah.
And you almost wonder if he's just a little bit juvenile. And like when he's talking to Mitchum, and I say Mitchum, Robert Mitchum's character, but when he's talking to him, it almost feels like he's in over his head. And then he gets into this scenario where he's with the kid buying the M16s, and he's legit. He's got street smarts and he understands how to operate that shit.
Yeah.
Well,
it's great. He puts the floodlight on and then he dives down off of the road into the embankment or the ditch and just pointing the gun, and like he knows his shit at the very last minute.
He still honors the deal too. At that point, he's got the upper hand. He could have bailed, but he still honors the deal. He gives him the money. Even the intelligence he shows when he's supposed to sell the hippies the guns in the parking lot. I mean, he gets pinched for it, but he knows how to look for a setup. So he knows to watch out and what to do. I'm going to camp out here for 2 hours and see what cars are gone.
Yeah.
And so
how great is that parking lot scene, by the way? Like it's like, this isn't an action movie, but like, that's the moment where you're like, oh yeah, the guy that directed this did direct Bullet.
Yes,
right.
That's what I was going to say too about Peter Yates, who directed the film, which I've never seen any of the films except Bullet.
Okay, yeah.
Steve McQueen film. So I wasn't familiar with any of his other work.
You haven't seen
except for
Krull? I'm
I've
a big Krull apologist.
I know the film, but I've never seen it. And the only one I've seen is Bullet, and I'm a Steve McQueen fan. So
Right.
But other than that, like I hadn't seen Krull, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, actually,
thinking I got to go see Krull.
I think you do. I actually defended Thor: The Dark World by saying, I don't know, I just loved like the space opera feel of it, and you know, you have all these like dark elf minions who just get gunned down with lasers, and I'm like, I love it, man. It's like Krull, and I can't remember who I was arguing with, and they're like, you liked it because it was like Krull.
I didn't know what you were talking about when you mentioned Krull, but I just pulled it up on IMDb, and yeah, I've heard of this movie. I've never seen it, but I've not heard good things about it.
It's fun. It's not a great movie, but
Right.
it's fun. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that one that everyone loves, or you have some kind of nostalgic attachment to it. And it sounds like that's part of Desmond's nostalgic attachment. And now I need to watch it, though, because
Yeah.
I haven't ever seen it all the way
It's
through.
fun. You know, it's part of that sword and sorcery era, you know, Conan and
I'm not against those.
Beastmaster.
Alan only watches horror films. Alan?
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I have a hard time getting out of my little thing. Like when I've started making a list of movies when it's my turn to choose, and the majority of them are horror or horror adjacent. And I'm trying to get. I've got a couple though, Gabe, that I'll run by you at some point. But I'm finally inching my way out of there. It takes a little pushing though.
I'm trying the best I can.
But
Alan's actually he's stretched. I mean, I love horror films too, but not to the degree that maybe Alan does or you do. But he's stretching my limits in the horror genre.
all right. That's good.
We're gonna push your limits big time at some
We're
point.
gonna make an accolade out of
Well,
it.
I think with Martyrs, you drew me. You put,
That was right out of the gate. That was right when I joined the show too. I was like, all right, we're watching Martyrs, man. We'll see how much you can take.
Martyrs,
heavy hitter. That was a heavy hitter.
Martyrs is tough.
Yeah.
Martyrs is tough.
It's
Yeah.
tough. But obviously, we got to talk, and we kind of have touched on it. But we got to talk about the bank robbers because they're kind of like throughout this whole film, they're kind of in the background, and you don't really know what the connection is and why they keep flashing back to these guys. And
You barely see them without masks on in the movie.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, maybe it's just the masks, but they seem extremely sinister.
Yes.
With the first bank president, when they're letting him go, you kind of get the sense that they're going to shoot him in the back as he's walking away. Like it's real. It really is intense as he's walking blindfolded away from the car. And that's why. And then when they show that they honor their deal, like they honor what they promised him, that they'll let him go and they'll let his family go. When you see them kill someone later on, it's a little bit more in contrast to what you've kind of come to believe about these guys, because they so nonchalantly kill this dude to press the alarm and then kind of shrug it off.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
can I just say that I loved that scene too when they let him go. I know it's just the way they filmed it. I mean, the execution by Peter Yates, it's so good because they let him go and they say, walk forward, and they give him the instructions. We're going to roll the window down, point a gun at you. You keep walking forward, count to 100.
100. Yeah. Count to 100 slowly.
Yeah, I just think it's so well done. And then what I loved editorially, and Alan, you can appreciate this. You're an editor. So it's like he's walking forward. You see the POV shot of his feet, and then you're anticipating that you're going to see the car still there pointing the gun at him. But when they cut back to the master shot, it's just empty, and he's by himself in this Bay Area in Boston, and he's just sitting in the weeds. I loved that little scene. I thought it was so good.
I know that it's not proper criticism to discuss what you wished happened in a movie, but I always fall into that trap. And I've seen this movie 12, maybe 15 times, and every single time I just kind of wish that he just keeps walking and then hits that barricade and falls into the water.
I was half expecting something along those lines.
That's so funny.
And then the bank robbers just laugh and drive away. Like that's what I want. I know it's not coming, but that's what I want every time.
I'm not even joking. That's funny. And you've seen this film way more times than me. I thought the exact same thing.
I've thought it every time I've seen the movie, even though I know full well it doesn't happen. Yeah.
That's the kind of the mind shift, or they get your mind thinking that this is going to happen, and then they pull away to that master, and he turns around and pulls
Yeah.
the blindfold off. But I thought the same thing. That's hilarious.
Yeah, and so again, that's when the violence happens. It's pretty surprising.
Yeah.
Although you can see it's going to happen. Like, it's going to happen. But honestly, they could have done that thing that they do in a lot of movies where one bystander does something stupid and then all hell breaks loose. But
Right.
instead, they know exactly what they're going to do. They kill the guy, they put everyone else in the vault, and they get out of there. Like, it's very organized. They planned it. They've probably done it before. So, again, it doesn't do that trope. Well, now it's a trope. I don't know if it was back then, where everything goes to shit. Like, they just, it's very, I don't want to call it realistic, but it feels real, like we've talked about.
It absolutely does. I mean, you got the FBI and Whitey Bulger who's not mentioned by name, by the way, in the commentary, but just a friend from the other side, I believe they call him. Giving you tips on how to rob a bank, and Yates says, they filmed in real banks. That's a real bar. I mean, they're obviously, is that the Boston Garden? I don't know sports. Is that the Boston Garden where they watch?
That was the old Boston Garden.
Bruins game. So they really all filmed there, and he's like, I didn't know. He's like, I didn't think they'd let us film in a real bank, especially because what we were doing was so real.
And did they tell them who would be on set as well?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Right, exactly. And they're like, well, the time lock goes off at a special time every day, and that's something I don't think was ever in a movie before this, right? And probably not a lot since, because I think people really take to the Point Break model of bank robbery in movies these days, where no one goes for the vault. Don't go for the vault. That's stupid, right?
You're going to pull me off on a side tangent if we start talking about Point Break.
Okay, sorry. I do unironically love that movie too.
I was just going to say the same thing, so I don't want to go too far into the weeds.
Well, we're going to have to add that one to the list too, because I haven't seen that one since I was probably, I don't know, 15, 16 or whenever it came out. So it's been a minute.
I'm nostalgically attached to the film, so we don't want to go too
yeah.
to the weeds.
And any movie where Anthony Kiedis blows his foot off with a magnum is chef's kiss.
And then I guess the final, unless I'm forgetting one, and I very well may be, but the final, I guess, storyline, it's not really storyline, but character, who we mentioned before, is Peter Boyle.
Right.
And the whole time I didn't understand what the hell his deal was. Like, he's friends.
I was going to ask you guys the same thing, Alan. I was in Desmond as the veteran viewer of this film. I was going to ask the same thing. I was confused on his placement within the overarching narrative in some sense.
Does he own the bar?
Right.
No.
Okay.
No, he does not.
I couldn't tell when he's talking with the cop and he says, well, I have a liquor license. And the cop says, you work for a guy who has a liquor license. I couldn't tell if they were being cagey or if he really does just work at the bar.
Right. The bar, I think, and his whole persona is a front. I don't know. I'm not going to fully spoil something, but you
can spoil.
Okay. It's a 50-year-old movie, but
yes, exactly.
So I think the film is trying to portray him as another trope, the guy who looks the other way and has these criminals meeting in his bar, and just allows it to happen. And of course he's shady. But also, I mean, we learn that it's right. We learn it's his truck that Mitchum was arrested.
Yeah,
for,
because
right?
Mitchum does say that I did that job for you, and he got busted doing the job for him.
Well, no, yeah, he says something like that's a funny thing coming from you or something like that.
Yeah,
right, yeah.
I mean, he's also getting $20 a week from the FBI.
Right.
Breaking the bank.
Like, really bringing in the heavy money.
Man, they're really pressing the taxpayers for that one.
$20 a week in 1973 is not bad, though.
That's true.
Good point. That's a good point.
Just for inflation, it's a little more.
It's not bad.
So he's a straight up informant then.
That's how I understand it, but I think Desmond could probably articulate it better.
Yeah, well, I mean, because actually we don't even know that what's his name, Richard Jordan is a cop at the beginning. Like he's just another scummy dude, right?
Yeah, exactly. I never knew when that first conversation when they're in the plaza and he's just talking and they get that he slides in that 20. I thought I thought he was another criminal.
Well, they were talking. He kept talking about the grand jury, and again, the dialogue is kind of it's pretty speedy. So I was kind of struggling to keep up. But at that point, I'm like, I wasn't sure. I was like, is he a cop? Because he's kind of talking like he's outside of this criminal world.
I was unsure. I thought he was just another criminal, underground kind of Boston gangster.
Yeah, I mean, and when he's meeting with Mitchum at the covered area of the playground there, like it almost sounds like they're playing it as Mitchum is asking him to go and kill the AD, assistant district attorney, I think is who they're talking about there, or judge or something like that. I want you to go talk to my friend the judge up north or whatever. And anytime that ever happens in the movie, it means go kill him,
right.
or go strong arm him or something. But it's literally just this cop talking to these crooks, trying to get these, hints on who they can take down. They just don't understand that Peter Boyle's character is much more than a scummy bar owner. He's like a legit assassin.
Is this also, and I'm trying to remember, is this also where we find out that Eddie's name is Eddie Fingers, or is that someone different? Because he says something about Eddie, like, remember Eddie Fingers?
I know this just from watching on Amazon, and they have the characters' names in
when you pause it or whatever.
Yeah, when you pause it. And so he's listed as Eddie Fingers Coyle. Yeah. So that's the only reason I know for sure.
So we know his, okay.
Right.
That's what I was trying to figure out too. I was like, who the hell is Eddie? For a second, it must be Eddie. But I was like, Eddie Fingers is there a more conventional is there a more conventional name than Eddie Fingers? I mean, that's like the most
they're making fun of him.
Okay, it was
because of his extra knuckles. Is that why?
Because
it goes back to that. Yeah,
because they broke all his fingers, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's great. I like the tie-in there. I didn't see it
because like even still, you watch this movie. Oh, it's Robert Mitchum. He's leagues beyond anyone else in the movie as far as being a movie star. So it's like, oh yeah, he's the big guy. No, he's not. He's just this little intermediary guy who's in some trouble, and people don't really respect him that much.
Which is really a bummer. In most like mob movies or something, the person who doesn't rat is usually glorified and kind of held up as a hero. And in this, they're kind of like, well, you knew the price of doing this, and he didn't rat on them, and that's why he's going to jail and no one else is.
Right. Yeah. And that's what makes that last scene with the cop so fucking profound.
And God, how unlikable is that cop?
Oh, it's great. He's a great villain. Just so good.
Like, I hate him with a passion watching him because after Eddie, he goes out of his way, he helps him catch some dude and doesn't stick up for him. He really doesn't. He asks for more. And then when he finally decides to give him more, to give him his friends, the guy's like, it's too late, man. There's nothing I could do for you, which basically like he's screwing him over big time. I despise him with a passion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as for a film full of villains, I mean, that cop is, you can make a good argument for him being the actual villain of the film, because he's bringing these guys together with these machinations that will eventually lead to the death of plenty of them, or jail for all of them, or something. Know that he's not really trying to orchestrate it, but he's playing. He's hunting down this gun runner, and then he's got two separate informants that don't know that they're both informing to the same cop, and then he's trying to find these bank robbers, and it's just this, what a wicked web we weave, or whatever, right?
I do love the line he gives when he busts the bank robbers in the kitchen. Yeah. When he walks in behind him, he goes, "April Fool's, motherfucker."
Yeah,
Like, it's
I
just
know,
like-
right?
I loved it. It was so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's great. It's almost like something you'd expect to see in Four Brothers or something. It's
Yeah.
it's a very modern moment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And just the little smile on his face and the deliveries, I just thought was excellent. So,
Yeah.
so I know we're kind of in a little bit of a time crunch here because you got to get going. But I guess unless there's anything I'm missing, because
well, there's one thing I want to mention about a couple of the, because this film is so driven, and as we've kind of mentioned, it's driven by the characters and the acting, and there's obviously plot points that kind of go through the film, but like you're so kind of intermixed between this line of action going on and this line of action going on, and then the gunsling, the kid that's trying to sling guns, and then you got Eddie's character. But I have to mention that you have James Tolkien.
Yeah.
oh
right,
yes,
of course.
yes, I'm glad you didn't let me forget him.
I just
Slacker,
didn't want you to forget him because
you're slacker, McFly.
exactly. I had to bring it up.
I'm so glad because I mean he's always going to be. I can't remember what the principal's name was in Back to the Future, but he's always going to be him.
As soon as I saw that was the first thing that came to mind.
Always.
Yeah. It's Strickland, right?
Strickland, that's right. Nose to nose with Marty, calling him a slacker. Like it's great. It's great.
So this film is just inundated with cameos or guest stars appearances. Mo Green.
Yeah, absolutely.
Strickland, like everybody's just, and then of course, like, so I had to bring that up, but
I'm glad.
And he's great too. Like he's got this look like, I don't know. He looks like just this total complete psychopath. You know, he's got this weird look. He reminds me of, oh Christ. Shit. The Nazi from Marathon Man.
oh, okay. Which one, from which movie?
The Marathon Man.
Oh, okay.
Fuck.
Why
can't I remember? He's a super famous actor.
When I first saw Tolkien, I was like, where do I know him? And I was trying to pinpoint where I knew him from. And then it came to me Strickland, but I also thought he was and I forget his name, but the lead Nazi from Indiana Jones.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's
shit.
too.
Yeah, that's right.
For a brief second, I thought, is that him? And then I was like, no, that's Strickland.
It's when he spoke. That's when I was like, that's Strickland.
It's Strickland.
Yeah, totally. But let the cinephiles out there know that your mockery is very welcome because I couldn't come up with fucking Laurence Olivier, for Christ's sake.
Oh.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, but like the sniveling, bald, sort of pork pie hat wearing Nazi with little wire rim glasses, I think was pretty popular for about 10 years.
Just
there.
that weaselly little voice too. Just still gets me to this day. So yeah, well, let's kind of, Desmond, we'll start with you. Let's have you kind of just give your thoughts, your kind of summary, and then
one thing before we jump into that, Alan, tell us, and I don't care about spoilers because like Desmond said, this film's 40-50 years old. Tell us how the movie, let's do a quick summary on the movie ending, and then we'll get into those ratings. I just want to kind of get through the narrative to the end and how it ends and get you guys' impressions and thoughts on how you felt when it ended.
Good point. Go ahead, Desmond, if you're good.
Sure. Well, just to say what the ending is?
We're going right in. We're not holding back any spoilers.
Well, I mean, I mentioned the cop was the villain, but I guess Peter Boyle is sort of the underground low-key villain because at the end of the film, he meets Strickland. I can't remember the character's name. They all work for the man, right? And no one knows who that is.
The anonymous man.
We're never told who he is. Doesn't matter, but he's a pretty bad guy.
And James Tolkien is actually credited as the man's contact man.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's a great name.
Yeah.
It's a great name for a character.
Can I say when he got the script and that's what the character said?
Yeah.
He's like, wait a minute, what? Who am I?
I don't even have a name. But so James Tolkien is hiring Dylan, the bartender, Peter Boyle, to kill Eddie Coyle because they believe that Eddie Coyle ratted out his buddies, which he was actively trying to do.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we do feel bad for him, but he actually was trying to do it.
Yeah. And then Peter Boyle's like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I want my money though. But under the radar, it's Peter Boyle that ratted on the bank robbers, and so he's just cleaning his hands of everything and walking away, scot free, totally fine. So not only did his ratting work out, but also the only guy that can say, hey, I actually didn't rat is now dead. So, but he did it in a nice way. Honestly, if someone's going to kill me, you want to take me out to a hockey game, get me a bunch of beer.
Exactly. Drunk.
Yeah. Shoot me in the back of the head while I'm passed out. Is there a better way to die than that? I mean,
no
probably. Yeah. No pain whatsoever.
No pain, straight black.
So I think like literally there was a bit of respect there, and I think like that was that moment where it is abrupt when he kills him, but I think in Dylan's head he's like, well, he's out, he's passed out, now's the time. Now there was like a wax statue of Robert Mitchum that I think they were going to do like a gory kill with, but we don't see that. We just see the bullet hit the window.
Right. That's what I kind of liked and appreciated about it. Like seeing it for the first time, I thought, whoa, all of a sudden Eddie's gone, but they didn't, once again, it wasn't glorifying that over the top violence. I liked the idea of just kind of seeing the windshield or the glass shatter.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I don't think it's like a huge surprise. I mean, it's a surprise, I think, how it all unfolds with Dylan. Yeah. And all that, but I mean, I think Eddie Coyle was doomed from the beginning of this movie.
Absolutely,
it was pure nihilism.
I think it seemed so friendly at first, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in the back of the car, that's where it ended. You figured it was going to end at some point, but I wasn't quite sure. For me, as a first-time viewer, I thought, hey, it seemed in that moment in the car seemed abrupt, and I kind of liked the little bit of shock value, not to the idea of his death, but to the idea of how it happened so quickly. Yeah.
Funny story about that. Trina, I think is her name. Trina Mitchum, Robert Mitchum's daughter, was on set while Robert Mitchum was like dating two stewardesses and who happened to show up.
Of course he was.
Yeah, of course he was. But the moment they called Peter Boyle to do that scene, which was the last scene that he filmed, he got up and he looked at her, and they were all like smoking pot in the trailers and stuff. And he's like, hey, little girl, I'm going to go splatter your daddy's brains all over the windshield.
I can hear him say that too.
Yeah.
I can hear that in his voice.
And they were all just drunken stone maniacs too. Like, Mitchum was a legendary alcoholic. So he was drunk by lunchtime every day, basically.
Well, I was going to say when he's drunk, leaving the hockey game, before he's like passed out drunk, it feels very legitimate. Like,
for sure.
I think it'd be hard to play intoxicated as an actor, but I guess if you got that much experience, it's second nature to you.
and it's 9 o'clock at night and you're 14 bourbons and 22 Budweiser in. It's definitely not hard to act drunk, right?
No.
Imagine going to work, getting able to get blitzed, and just getting paid tons of money for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
It's American dream right there.
Actually, at that hockey game, he got into a fight with a cinematographer who got too close.
Of course,
seriously, got too close with him with a camera. So he took one of those cups of beer and threw it right at him and all over the camera and everything.
Oh, and
I can't remember who it is. Oh, it's in a Rolling Stone article, and someone I think it was Peter Boyle, who said, yeah, it's a good thing cinematographer backed away, because if he was within arm's reach, Mitchum would have thrown him off the balcony.
Jeez. Man, these old-time Hollywood actors, man, they knew how to do it back then.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, let's hear your final thoughts.
Just one thing, Alan.
Oh yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah, sorry.
This is usually Gabe's job to kind of guide this, so I'm jumping the gun here.
No, we're not jumping the gun. You're absolutely on point. I just wanted to say the last scene is the two of them in that plaza, and he says, "Have a nice day."
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, Peter Boyle and I forget his name. What's the character?
Richard Jordan.
Richard Jordan.
Richard Jordan, the actor.
Richard Jordan, Peter Boyle, and Richard Jordan says, "Have a nice day," and they were in not cahoots, but they had been. You knew they were friends the whole time, and kind of And I just like that last line, like, have a nice day. That's it.
It's great.
Well, I mean, all the betrayal that's been going on, by both the cop and Peter Boyle, like, it doesn't affect them. It's part of their life.
They just split ways and keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So
next gig.
Yeah,
exactly.
And just that moment where Mitchum says, "I can get you the guys that robbed those banks," and he just looks at him and says, "Well, Eddie, I'd have been really into that yesterday," and he just flips over the newspaper, but we got them last night, right?
And he says it in such a condescending, snarky way too. I just want to elbow him through the teeth.
and then at that moment, like, he's just sitting there with his bourbon at the table, and you just know, like, it's over for him. It's completely over. Like, how many characters get that low in a movie? Not many, but that was it, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
sorry, I just wanted to bring that up, but you're up, Alan. Go ahead and take over the show.
I'm trying to do your job here, Gabe. I'm not doing a great job, but all right, Desmond.
Fantastic.
let's hear kind of your summary and what you would rate it out of 10.
Well, it's a unique crime film, I think, in that it's not built on shock or violence or I guess shock and violence. I guess it's not. It's built on character. There's plenty of tension. Those bank robbing scenes are excellent, just full of tension. But it's built on tension. It's built on character. It's got a wicked jazz score, and it's so engaging, and it's slowly paced, but it moves along at a clip. Even still today, I watched it again. I looked down. I'm like, fuck! It's been on for 45 minutes. I can't believe it. This movie's been going for 45 minutes, and it just moves at such a quick clip, and it leaves you so, I don't know, like, well, it leaves me so delighted at the end. It's just a truly beautiful little crime film that's completely unique, actually. Like no movie had been like this before, and I don't think there's been a movie like it since.
Yeah, I agree. What would you rate it if you had to give it a rating out of 10?
Oh,
we like to go to the 10th percentile, so put that extra decimal on there.
All right. Well, let's say I don't want to be the guy that's like, well, it's a 10 out of 10. It is one of my favorite movies.
So you can definitely do that because my girlfriend Jess was on this show and she gave So I Married an Axe Murderer a 10. So
Nice.
You're totally good.
Man. Whoa, man. Whoa, man. God damn.
She's going to be so happy that you just did that.
That is stuck in my head for 30 years at this point. Yeah, so let's say I'll give it 9 Lugers and 1 Magnum. How about that?
Ooh, nice.
That's great. That's fantastic.
All right, I would say, or do you want to go, Gabe?
Yeah, I'm gonna let you round.
I'm getting your full duties tonight. I like this.
Yeah.
I've
passed the baton, baby.
I've been promoted.
The odds are I'll keep passing the baton because you'll do 10 times better than me.
No, I doubt that.
So, the thing I feel regret for not having known this movie before. This is a really good film. And like I mentioned in the intro, for me, love the 70s Americana films with the kind of gangster touch with French Connection, Serpico, Godfather, Taxi Driver, all those things.
Yeah.
And for not having known this film, watching it going, man, it holds up to those, in my opinion. It's that good of a film. It really fits into that category amongst those other ones that you think about. So I really loved it. I'm glad that Desmond was able to introduce it to us. For me, as I was watching it, definitely, and as Alan knows, Desmond, I always kind of rate based on a rewatchability.
Sure.
So, can I rewatch this thing? And the answer is absolutely, for me, yes, because it fits into my wheelhouse. So first off, thanks for introducing me to the film, because I will definitely rewatch it. I'm going to go with it's definitely something everybody should see. I think Robert Mitchum is fantastic. It's fun to see Peter Boyle and the other characters that you mentioned. I'm going to go with a 8.7 fingers.
Ooh, that's really good, man. I thought you were going to go machine guns. All right, I'm going to I'll keep this quick.
Alan, round us out with IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. Do you have that?
Okay,
there?
yes, I do actually. So IMDb, it is rated at a 7.5 out of 10. So
That's respectable for IMDb.
For IMDb,
Yeah.
it is definitely.
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes, the critics 100%.
Crazy.
Only 27 reviews, but still, that's 100%. And when do critics agree on anything? Audience score 88.
That's actually really, really good.
Yeah, it is.
Of course, it's 100, but I don't think we've ever seen 100.
I don't think we have.
Critic.
I don't think we have.
In 30 plus podcasts, and I know, like we mentioned this before, Desmond, we're only 650 behind you. But in 30 plus podcasts, I've never seen 100%. So
Audience score is 88%, so that's still great too. And not a lot of audience ratings for this either. It's 1,422. And so usually you'd think a movie this old would have a lot more than that. So I think we're not alone in not being super familiar with this film. If you would have asked me what I would rate it before the ending, I probably would have said somewhere mid sixes, just because I was a little confused about everything. And we were so close to the end, and I didn't feel like we were going to get answers for anything.
Yeah.
But at the ending, it kind of everything made sense, and I started to understand the characters' motivations a lot more. It bumped it up a lot. I'm going to go 7.2 years in the big house. So yeah, I mean, it's a great movie. And again, I echo Gabe's sentiments. Thanks for introducing this to us.
yeah,
That makes me extra happy knowing that I can introduce this classic to you guys, because I love this movie.
and now we've introduced it to our 21 listeners.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I
Go
don't know what
watch
the number
it.
is.
Yeah.
We're just making it up.
And before Gabe takes us out, Desmond, real quick, I know you got to run, but tell us where we can find your stuff.
Podcast stuff at dreadmedia.com. New episode every week. I don't know. I have desmondreddick.com, but I haven't used it in years. I should probably start doing that again. But yeah, my novel Mother of Abominations is on Amazon. So if you like giant monsters fucking things up and I don't know, Irish Republican Army related stuff. And yeah, so check that out. And I'm just stoked you guys invited me. I hope I can come back sometime.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Absolutely,
It was a lot of
dude.
fun. You pick good movies, too, so I'm definitely down.
Absolutely. If you're choosing films like The Friends of Eddie Coyle, you're always welcome on this podcast.
Well, the next one will be Krull. No.
That's great.
I'll wait until I don't want to come back to choose that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, everybody, it's been a blast. And Desmond, thank you so much for joining us. And go check out Desmond's work at the aforementioned websites and definitely at Dread Media Podcast. This is the Tame Aperture Podcast. Go check us out at tameaperture.com and look for previous episodes and also give us suggestions on future episodes. This is Gabe, Alan, and Desmond signing off for the Tame Aperture Podcast. Take care, everybody.
The Tame Aperture podcast is produced by Dutch Angle Pictures in association with Studio B Productions. Listen, watch, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube.